Oh, hello and welcome to another video. As usual, my name is Jeffrey and you're welcome to Inquisitive Universe. So let's get started. So I was recently called to mediate a quarrel on social media, and the quarrel was it was about something that I actually considered trivial at the time, but when the thread got as long as probably 50 comments, and a lot of the comments were very misguided, I felt that this is a video I should be making on my channel, on this channel, on our channel. So let's get started. In today's video, I want to talk about the RAM scam. Yes, how companies trick you with big RAM. That's what this video is about. Now, don't get me wrong. I know some people, their minds are already running. RAM is one of the most important system resources on any computer, whether it's a smartphone or whether it's a PC or a laptop or whatever, Mac, supercomputers, etc. But RAM is important. But its importance has been overstated somewhat, that the lines are blurred, in a way that many people actually do not know that, this is where RAM is good up to an extent and it doesn't get beyond that. So that's what I'm going to try and explain. Now, sorry, my face was itching a bit. Let's get into it. RAM, specifically DRAM, or on a smartphone, LPDDR RAM, is a memory that sits very close to the CPU cores that's inside the SoC on a smartphone. Now, the reason why the RAM sits very close to the SoC, or to the CPU cores rather, is because the CPU cores on a smartphone do not have memory within themselves to be able to carry out tasks. Now, take for example, let's say a game now like eFootball or PUBG that averages around 4 gigs of RAM. That's, like, you want to play a game using the SoC. I think the SoC, I want to play X game, PUBG, I want to play this. The SoC has to load the RAM, the maps, the skins, the guns, the vehicles and stuff. It has to load them into a type of memory that it can be able to access and work with. Now, the memory that is closest to the SoC or to the CPU cores is the RAM, so it takes it and then it keeps it there. You follow? Now, without the RAM, the CPU will be unable to work. It's as simple as that. I have already done a whole lot of videos on this subject, and I would leave the playlist at the end of this video so you can be able to just go and then brush up. I can't really, that would extend the length of this video, and I don't really want to go that far. So this is where RAM is important, because without without adequate RAM, the CPU cores will not process data. And not just that, RAM is also important for multitasking as well, because without enough RAM space, you will not be able to multitask. Multitasking means opening more than two apps basically at once, and then cycling through them, trying to carry out different tasks. If you do not have enough RAM, you will not be able to do that. So these are the two key functions of RAM, and that's where it mostly stops. It helps the CPU carry out its function, and then it helps with multitasking. Those are the two main ones, you follow. And then you could also talk about background tasks, but they are all under multitasking. So since RAM is this important, how do companies scam people using RAM? Well, there are several ways, and the very first one is, first off, they try to make RAM seem more important than it is. And trust me, I have been a victim of that before, trying to make RAM seem more important. Now, anytime from 2013 all the way up to say 2016, even 2017 to an extent, whenever people were telling me that my phone is powerful, the first question I would ask them, I'm telling you the truth, I won't lie to you guys, the first question I would ask them is, how many gig RAM? I'm serious, guys, I'm serious. The first question I would ask them is, how many gig RAM? Because in my mind, it's the size of the RAM that means how powerful the phone is. You'd see people, and somebody would say, for example, as at the time, I have 1 gig, my phone is 1 gig RAM, and then somebody would be like, 1 gig RAM, my phone is 2 gig RAM. Hey, your phone, 2 gig RAM phone is better. So that's how this idea has been formed in the minds of a lot of people, that the phone with more RAM is more powerful than the phone with less RAM, even when this is not so. Why is that? Because companies advertise RAM in front and center, and then move all other specs that they do not want you to see. They move it off to the side, or basically just ignore it. They won't even talk about it, they won't even write about it. And I have seen big sites act as their accomplices in this regard. They just put those away, and then when somebody goes to check, the average person goes to check for phones, when they go to performance, all they see there is 8 gig RAM, and then they'll be like, okay, so when it comes to performance, this is what I see. That's the first one. That's the first thing that they do. They put RAM front and center, and then they try to hide away the SoC so that you don't see. That's the first one. 2, now, which is a continuation from 1. 2, the reason why they put big RAM, 4 gig, 6 gig, 8 gig sometimes, is usually to hide the what's it called now, the inadequacy, let's use that term, the inadequacy of the SoC that they put on board. Now, RAM is a serious resource, right? On many, like up until recently, flagships were using 6 gigs of RAM. In fact, on most iPhones still use 6 gigs of RAM to this day. You follow? So which means that RAM is like an important resource. So like companies do not just throw, companies are what they are sort. They don't just throw it willy-nilly. RAM is an important resource. Like you see, like, you know, technically standard for mid-rangers, you see 4 gig RAM and 6 gig RAM. Upper mid-rangers, you see 4, 6, and probably 8. Flagships 8, 6, 8. On most flagships 6, 8, 6, 8, 6, 8. Although it's more recently that, you know, flagships are starting to crawl, you know, into the realms of 12 gigs of RAM. I think gaming phones have already crossed that barrier since, but gaming phones are a niche product. When we talk about like mainstream products, flagships are usually 8, 6. Upper mid-rangers or mid-rangers in general 4, 6. Then more recently they've been curling into 8. So you get like these SoCs, these are RAMs that we're talking about, like these sizes are usually paired with very capable SoCs, very capable processors. So capable RAM, capable processor, and then the performance is like that. You know, you're buying an upper mid-ranger or a flagship, very good phone. Now we are starting to see 6 gigs of RAM and 8 gigs of RAM on entry-level products with processors like Unisoc T606, T606, Helio G37, Helio G25. What does that tell you, basically? What it means is that, you know, these weak processors, they'll take, like, you know, these entry-level phones with very weak processors, and then they put big RAM on top of it. And when you put big RAM on top of it, most people would not want to check and see the processor behind the RAM. They know that this is big RAM, it's 8 or it's 6 gigs of RAM, I am buying it. Because that was what the stuff I was sent to mediating, the issue, the disagreement. That's what was happening there. Because person A said that phone A with Helio G88 with 8 gigs of RAM was better than phone B with Snapdragon 680 with 6 gigs of RAM. And that was where the argument ensued from. And the person A stood his ground and said that phone A had more RAM and so therefore it was better, without even discussing the fact that the underlying processors below are what matters more. Now, yes, even if you have a good processor and you don't have like a decent size of RAM, there's going to be a CPU bottleneck where the CPU or the SoC will not be able to reach its full potential because there's not enough space for it to store apps into. You get? But when all things are equal, all things being equal, the first thing you should be checking out for, it's not the RAM size, it's the processor. Because even if you have 20 gig RAM on your smartphone and then the processor in there is weak, the RAM there is just going to be, it's just there. And that will take me to the next thing I want to talk about very quickly as this video goes along, is the fact that most of these RAM sizes are a total scam. Now, I'm not saying that they're a scam. It's very possible that they could be misrepresenting the numbers in there, but I'm not going to say that that's a conspiracy theory at this point. I'm saying that it's possible that there could actually be physically 8 gigs of RAM in that space. But one issue here, one very big issue, is that any phone that is below mid-range, when we talk about budget and entry level, use 32 bits operating system. That's the version of Android that they use is slimmed down, because Android can be heavy sometimes, and Android consumes a lot of, you know, like CPU power to run. So if you go and put the full version of Android, the 64-bit operating system, on those weak lower budget or entry level SoCs or CPUs rather, that processor isn't going to work fine, because it's going to be battling the operating system on one hand, and then probably may not even have enough resources to be able to run apps and tasks. That's why most budget and entry-level phones, they use 32-bit operating system. Now, 32-bit operating systems can only address 4 gigs of RAM space. 4 gigs of RAM space. So those phones with Helio G25, Helio A22, Exynos 850, which other SoCs are there? Unisoc T606, Helio G35, G36, G37. Like, I don't know, like these are most of the processors in that budget space. Most of these SoCs are run using 32-bit SoCs, 32-bit operating systems, which means that they can only ever address 4 gigs of RAM. So which makes putting 6 or 8 gigs of RAM there completely pointless. It's like a car, for example. Normally a car should run with 4 tires, right? Putting an additional 2 tires is just, what's the point? It's just a vanity fair, adding 2 more tires to a car that already runs fine with 4 tires, basically speaking. So when it comes to this, because I've seen people like, you know, I've seen somebody said that, you know, they've seen a Helio G37 phone with 8 gigs of RAM, and they're like, I'd prefer the Helio G37 phone with 8 gigs of RAM over a phone with, you know, Snapdragon 680 that only has 4 gigs of RAM, because, you know, 8 gigs of RAM is better than 4 gigs of RAM. And I'm like, how do I explain this thing to you people? It's not the RAM. The RAM is important, yes, but it is the SoC, the processor under it, you know, it's the processor under it that can tell how useful the RAM is going to be. If the processor under it cannot load apps into that RAM space becomes useless. Yes, a decent amount of RAM, anything over 4 gig is what I usually advise people, especially those people that want to play games with their phone or record video or do stuff, serious stuff with their phone. A decent amount of RAM size is very important, nothing less than 4 gig RAM. But that doesn't mean because you're chasing RAM size, you should go after phones with mediocre processors, mediocre SoCs. You will only hurt yourself in the long run. And unfortunately, I'm saying this now because the what's it called now, the brainwashing is actually very solid. It's working, right? Because I was once a victim of it. I once thought that it was the RAM size that was more important. I had no idea what SoCs are. It's why I'm making this video right now. Do not fall for the RAM scam. Anytime you see the RAM, always make sure that you check underneath to see the SoC, the processor that is there. If it's a good decent processor with enough, you know, with enough juice to power decent sized apps. Usually I use eFootball as my benchmark. If the phone can run eFootball, then it's good enough for me. If it cannot run eFootball, then I have no business with that phone whatsoever. So that's what you should be checking as well, so that you do not fall victim to the RAM scam. All right, because you're only adding up this big RAM in order to inflate the prices of these phones, you know, to get people to pay more for what is actually less. So you should be able to check, spot these things, and then be able to say, you know, I'm jumping over this trap, it ain't gonna work for me, right? So with that, we've come to the end of this video. Thank you very much for sticking with me all the way through to the end. If you enjoyed what you heard and you want to hear more, please give this video a like and subscribe. Also, you can also turn on notification bells, but it is what it is. Share this video, tell your friends, tell people that, you know, like, the RAM scam is real. Don't fall for the RAM scam. Okay, my name is Jeffrey, and I'll see you in the comments as well as in the next video. Bye bye.